Hey guys, it's Cord Ross, and today we're breaking down why Year 9 operators for Rainbow Six Siege are performing badly. And this is coming off the heels of what I think is one of the best years for Rainbow Six Siege for operator design, and that was last year with Brava, Fenrir, Ram, and Tubero. And these were all top tier operator designs, with their gadgets being really good and unique, and having their own little niches that they just excelled in. And Tubero and Fenrir did need a little bit of adjusting because they were actually a little bit too good, but overall, an excellent year for operators. But that leads us into this year, which seems to be the year of hell for Rainbow Six Siege. And that brings us with Season 1, which was actually a very good hype season. Everyone got real excited about it. I wasn't a big fan of the operator when I first played him, but I thought he was going to be relatively powerful. Of course, looking at these balancing graphs, that is not the case. Even with a few buffs he's had since release, he is not performing well at all, with a win rate matching that of Sen's. And Sens, although I think the gadget idea is good, Sens is unfortunately just a horrible operator, even with a bunch of upgrades we've had along the way. And for Damus to be down at that same win rate is pretty damn bad. Now, I personally thought when Damus was introduced that he would actually be used as an intel operator, where you wouldn't actually go and do the one-on-one fight. Instead, you would just ping the defender and then lead your team to them. And of course, they'd have their primary weapons out and be able to take that defender down a lot easier than you would be able to do. But instead, I actually think that Damus ends up on the losing side of the fights most of the time. Now, this might come down to just being that he's a relatively new operator and people haven't really got to the point of being able to use him good yet. But honestly, in 6 months' time, I don't think Damus is really going to move from this position unless he does get some big additional buff. But unfortunately, I think they have a lion problem when it comes to buffing him, because you can't just make the ping better or have a longer duration or something like that. It is really difficult, just like how it was to balance out Lion. But this is, of course, inverted. You try to make him more powerful without breaking him. And I think it's going to be super difficult to just get that tweak that makes him good, but not go over that line that makes him OP. Now, the developers did originally think that he was going to have the M4 in his loadout, but they considered it to be too powerful a weapon. And now, looking at it, I'm kind of like, maybe he really should have the M4. Although I don't think switching weapons would save him. I think the gadget here is the problem, with it being kind of cool idea. It just doesn't, I think, pay off in gameplay. But again, like I've said before, maybe it is just too early and people just haven't learned how to use them properly yet. And if we do need a solution, I don't know what it's going to be. I'd love to know in the comments below what you think could be done to fix Damus. Now let's move on and talk about the recruits. So of course, we were told these new recruits were going to be made viable for ranked. And we all thought they were going to have some sort of unique gadget and still hopefully be a 5-stack and stuff like that. And of course, that did not end up happening. And instead, we just got a variation of the recruits we already have, but with cosmetics tagged on. And I don't think the recruits have become particularly viable. And in fact, I actually think one of them is far worse than the other, and that is the defender recruit, Century, who is matching the performance of Chanka and Echo. And that's Echo without an ACOG at this point. He did get one in the mid-season, and Chanka does have an ACOG, showing you that ACOGs are not everything. But Century has become the 4th worst performing operator on defense. And just like with Damus, I don't know how you buff this operator. That's a big problem. Certainly, you could give them a better gun, which is exactly the same suggestion I gave for Damus, because I don't think there's much of other options to pick from. Now, presumably, and I think they hinted at this already, that they're going to add another secondary gadget to the game, probably relatively soon. And of course, the recruits will get them, but the secondary gadgets are made not to be OP because they're secondary gadgets. So it's not really going to make the recruit into a more powerful operator once that secondary shows up. And then there is the problem that these are super brand new operators. They've just came out and this is their first mid-season. So people definitely haven't had time to get properly used to playing these characters. But I do think that defending operator here is the worst. And I don't think we'll see any major changes to the recruits for quite some time, and I think they're going to perform really badly, especially this defender one. And we can see that in the balance graphs with the attacker, who is doing far better. And I think this does come down to the loadout, having the M4, and taking 2 of the secondary gadgets can be very useful on attack, where they're maybe a little bit less useful on defense. But still, the attacker isn't doing particularly great, especially if we compare them to last year's competitors with Ram and Brava, who are managing to beat them out on these balancing graphs. And in fact, they're actually almost model operators for being perfectly balanced. And at this point, I would like to point out how the audience reacts when these operators get revealed, and content creators and all that as well. Because a lot of us thought Ram was going to be broken and OP, but Ram's actually ended up being a beautiful balanced operator in the middle of all this mess. And plenty of people thought that Brava's slow gameplay was going to be detrimental, when in fact, again, a rather perfectly balanced operator. But I will say this, we don't actually know what the developers were originally thinking when these operators when it came to overall performance, because Damus may have always been designed to be a niche character who would never perform amazingly, but would be someone for those players who want to go into the 1v1s and throw themselves into combat. And the new recruits, we could say that they're actually a success because they are viable for ranked, they're just not great. And it could well be that that's what the developers were kind of after. But I think we can move on to conclusion now, which is the year 9 operators from Rainbow Six Siege so far are doing bad. We're halfway through the year. We've got a full operator coming next year from Greece, hoping they'll be good. Then we have a Blackbeard rework. Now, reworks, you looked at that graph earlier with Chanka. He is not doing great, and he had one of the biggest reworks that this game's ever had. So the idea that Blackbeard gets a good rework is, I give that like maybe a 20% chance, and the rest is that it gets kind of a boring rework that doesn't really end up working out that great. But for me, the biggest takeaway from all this is I think it's going to be very hard to balance out Damus and both the recruits because of the way they're designed. And I think they should try and stay away from pinging based gadgets because they're hard to balance. You've got that cliff that if you go over it, they become OP, and if you pull it back too much, they're just terrible, and it's like a knife edge to try to balance them out. And then the recruits, because they're just based on secondary gadgets, and the only real thing that can make them powerful or not, we certainly see that with the attacker recruit being better because they have a good gun, and the defender has a worse gun, I would say. But I certainly don't think giving the defender recruit a better weapon is going to solve the problem of these recruits being just not that good for ranked play. However, I wouldn't be against giving the recruits more variety of weapons to choose from like it used to be, because maybe the weapons that they have just don't go for the playstyles that people want to play with them, and everyone has their favourite weapons, of course. So yeah, I certainly do not have a magic bullet here to solve these guys' issues, and I think we're going to see, most likely in a couple of years' time, Damus getting some sort of rework, and I would not be surprised if we get our next version of recruits in like 5 years' time. I would not be surprised at all. So come back to this video if that happens. But will Siege, of course, be around in 5 years? We will see. But anyway, guys, that's a quick breakdown of the year 9 operators so far and how they are performing. And we will see what the rest of the year brings. The Greek operator, I've got everything crossed that that's going to be a good operator. And we'll see what happens with Blackbeard. And then hopefully the year of hell for Rainbow Six Siege, which has come together with bugs, content issues, and cheaters. Hopefully there is some sort of alleviation to those issues going into year 10. But certainly the start of year 9 has not been a good start, and we will see if it continues to be bad or if it improves. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.